Welcome to the Zero Input Agriculture podcast. Today, I am talking to plant breeder, low input farmer, and social networker. We've got a trifecta here. Gregg Muller from the southern end of Australia, the cooler part of Australia. And let's just jump straight into it. Tell me a bit about your background. Let's have an overview about who you are.
Okay, I'm 69, retired from paid employment. I used to work at the La Trobe University, amongst other things. I've been growing tomatoes ever since I can remember, I think. Everyone has a competition in southern Victoria to get a tomato before Christmas and used to play at that. But yeah, I just got a bit more serious as time went on, I suppose. I moved to Bendigo in about the year 2000 and was sort of suddenly shocked by how dry it was, how thin the soil was, how hot the days were, and how frosty the mornings were. So I had to sort of adapt a bit to how I was growing things. Yeah.
But Bendigo, is it similar to parts of like Iran in how hot and cold it can kind of go back and forth between? I'm trying to think of other parts of the world that people might be more familiar with that it's similar
The
to.
it's sort of a Mediterranean climate here. I suppose our tops are in the low 40 degrees Celsius. The freezes here aren't dreadful so far, probably -2 or something like that. 500 mil of rain a year if you get it. The last 3 years has been higher than that because we've had La Ninas. A correspondent of mine suggested San Martin in California
Hmm.
was same latitude and very similar climate.
Yeah. So often those are the kind of climates that if you can get the water to a crop, they actually can do spectacularly well.
Yeah, well, Bendigo was really well known in the past as a huge tomato growing area. And there was tomato canneries and tomato sauce ketchup factories here. And some people I know here still grow the original Campbell's 33 tomato that was the standby for the canning industry. And it's been passed down as a family heirloom.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I read somewhere that a lot of what we think of as heirloom vegetables are actually like early industrial era strains. Like they're not actually that old, but they probably have interesting traits that are worth hanging on to.
Yep, Blue Lake beans, I think, is the classic. Everyone holds that one as an heirloom, and it's the old commercial variety, for
Mm.
example. Mm.
So let me think. What path then led you into the work you do, the crop breeding and the low input agriculture? Like what's your motivation? Like what started that journey for you?
I'm driven by curiosity. I'm just really curious about stuff. And I got onto some online forums back in the early 2000s, and in particular the Osgrow forum, which was an Australian gardening forum, sadly now demised most of those forums. And there were a couple of really experienced growers on there who were bringing in all sorts of interesting seeds and growing all sorts of interesting stuff. Most people were pretty much doing bog standard things, but Ray South, for example, up in Armidale, New South Wales, was doing some interesting stuff. And people started talking about the cross hemisphere dwarf tomato initiative, which was started up by Petrini Nuski Small, who was then in Adelaide, and Craig LaHulia from the US. And they were, when it was still legal, swapping seeds back and forward. And a few of the members of that forum were doing grow outs. And I thought, oh, that sounds pretty interesting. I can make a little bed and grow something out, and I'll be part of this broader perspective, if you like. And I did grow outs for a year on a line called Snowy, which actually did result in a couple of named varieties. But I then got onto the Tomatoville forum in the US, and then eventually the Homegrown Goodness forum, which also came out of the US, which was pretty eye-opening. Anyway, I did grow out through a year, and then I thought, oh, I should do a dwarf tomato myself. So I did a cross of Jean Flamme, which is one of my favorite little orange golf ball early tomatoes, to one of the dwarfs, looking for a dwarf little orange tomato, which is still a work in progress 15 years later. Um, and I got onto Carol Deppy's breed your own vegetable varieties, which I just inhaled in a night, I think, or 2 days. And I just went, wow, this is, yeah, yeah, I'm really into this. And she has big chapters on growing purple snow peas. And I thought, oh, yeah. And then I looked more, and she actually hadn't come up with one yet, and there weren't any commercially available. And, when what is it? When you don't know anything, you don't know how little you don't know. And I just jumped in, said, yeah, I could do that. So I got hold of some purple snow peas, purple seeded soup peas and some snow peas and crossed them up and didn't keep very good records. And then I got onto the Rebsy Fairholm, is that her name? Daughter of the Soil. She was doing a lot of coloured snow pea breeding as well in the UK, and read right through her blogs as well. So I did these crosses and then thought, oh, I could do 3 generations a year, which I couldn't, but I did get two. And then just all of this diversity arose. There was just, so much comes out once you do a cross. And I just worked on those, and I've now got, I think, 3 pretty good purple snow peas that are sort of finished project. And then I started thinking, oh, what would, I grew golden potted, the yellow potted supposed snow pea that's actually not very good. And I thought, oh, I can improve on this. So I crossed it up to some decent snow peas. I think Melting Mammoth was one, and ended up with a really good yellow snow pea. Well, there's only one, really only one gene to stabilize there. So it was pretty easy to do a recessive gene. And then I crossed that to one of the field peas which is semi-leafless, and ended up with a whole lot of diversity out of that. And then I just started asking questions like, I was blogging a lot of this too at a blog I started up called Templeton's Mendellania. Templeton was my online forum name. And yeah, yeah. So then I just started asking all these other questions like, well, Bendigo, like the soil's really thin, it's really rocky. I was on a hillside at the back of an old mining site. We'd moved to Bendigo at the start of what I call the Howard drought, the 10 years of hardly any rain down here. And I thought, oh, where have I moved to? And I thought the soil's really shallow. I need to get crops in and out as quickly as I can. So I need to shorten those seasons if I can, so I don't have to try and water things through a Bendigo February.
Mm-hmm.
That drought, by the way, it was horrendous. We weren't allowed to turn on a tap outside the house.
Mm.
There was no legal reason to turn on a tap. So I was running out of, I think, about a 10,000 litre tank, which had caught rain off the roof. And if it didn't rain for 3 months, I was out of water. And anyway, I thought, well, what about little short, fat carrots? They're growing in shallow soil. I can get them in and out of the ground pretty quickly. And I thought, why don't they come in purple? So, not knowing anything at all about carrot color genetics or carrot genetics at all, I just got yellow, white, orange, purple carrots. And I got little Paris market round carrots, planted them in groups, and then harvested the seed off the little round ones. And I've spent the last 10 years trying to get rid of white and long. But I've got there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I've now got a little diverse, pretty short, pretty purple carrot that I'm calling Purple Rainbow.
That's one thing I love about crop breeding, that anyone from, like a Neolithic illiterate farmer through to somebody with a PhD in genetics can do it just as well. Like if you're interested in all of those high technical ways of looking at it, go for it, but they're not necessary at all.
No, no, there was a, a bit of a line in or a note in Carol Deppy's book about, sometimes she does go to the literature and looks for all the genes so that she can hunt down for the traits that she's after. But often she just puts stuff in to see what happens. And
Hmm.
I sort of did that as well. Uh, I finally got convinced that parsnips weren't poison and that they were nice to eat. So I thought, okay, I'll try and grow some of those. And I thought, oh, big, long, deep parsnips, you need sandy soil. It's got to be 3 feet deep. And but why does a parsnip have to be long and skinny? Like,
Mm.
why can't we have short, fat parsnips like beetroot or turnips,
Mm.
And turns out there was a short fat parsnip available in Europe, and I did manage to get some seed in from America. It was still legal to bring seed in then, which was nice. And so I just crossed up that short fat parsnip called Kral with every parsnip I could find here, like pretty casually. I didn't search super hard, and then just let the bees do their business.
Mm.
And of course, my second breeding project, I picked a biennial plant. So not even thinking that this is going to take 2 years to get seed off each generation, but you can fast track that a bit, which I did manage to do. And yeah, I'm still working on that one as well. These biennial crops are a little bit difficult to get hold of. But again, it was looking for something where I didn't have to do a whole lot of soil preparation in my crappy stony soil and stuff that I could turn over pretty quickly.
What kind of area are you cultivating on typically? Like
Oh, look,
how much
um,
space do you need?
my first house here in Bendigo, where I was probably working for 10 or 12 years, my total bed area was about 30 square meters.
Mm.
So I was on a hillside and I terraced it up with red gum sleepers and little brick paths in between. And I think I had four cascading down the slope with the tank at the top of the slope and just drip irrigation through dripper line. And yeah, I mean, I still remember the day I went out to prepare a bed in October. No, it was actually July. So at the middle of our winter, and every shovelful was clouds of dust.
Hmm.
There's just no moisture in the soil at all. Um, I also, look, yeah, because I'm curious and I don't know when to stop. I also got hold of some farthest north melon seed that came from Tim Peters originally, I think, in the US. And I thought, oh, yeah, we could grow that out. Wouldn't it be great to get a little round cantaloupe, a little muskmelon? And stupidly mixed it up with a whole lot of other stuff, like, and now I've had to try and re-extract it. But yeah, now I've got this lovely little fragrant, delicious orange fleshed cantaloupe that slips from the vine when it's ready. And again, it was that attempt to try and get a crop off before the huge peak of, the dreadful summers that we were
Yeah.
having year after year. I haven't been able to test that now at my new property. So I've got a hectare now with, but I can't crop all of that. I've got two beds. I've got a research bed that's eight 1 meter wide beds, 13 meters long. And that's where I do most of my grow outs and seed crops and stuff. And then I've got a kitchen bed about half that size where we're allowed to eat it. And I've got a couple of big beds out the front that are just covered in weeds, and I've just put them in on the contour, so they just get a little bit of water that comes off a neighbouring block. They get a lot of shade from some really big river red gums nearby, but I think they get a bit more moisture as well because there's a drainage line nearby.
Mm. Oh, that's a decent amount of space to work with.
Oh, it's
So
too much. It's too much.
well, I mean, you can always leave it like I do. My excess spaces go into weeds when I'm not using them, and I call that a fallow. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it does good for the soil. Like you can over cultivate soil by doing all the right things for too intensively for too long.
Yeah, so the new property is really close to a creek. And so I've got much deeper soils. They're much nicer. They're not rich black soils or anything like that. They're still the brown sort of clay that you get around Bendigo, but they do grow nicer crops than the hillside I was on.
So, do you want to tell us about some of the particular species that you're working on the most, or that you're the most excited about?
Right. I reckon the snow peas are finished, and I'm just going to draw a line under those. And I'm just growing a crop to try and get rid of pea weevil that I think came out of some pea straw I used several years ago, which I won't ever use again.
Mm.
I think the little muskmelon's finished, the little mealicious melon. The purple rainbow carrot, I reckon, is finished. Parsnip. I'll just keep growing that out and trying to reselect for it a bit, but that's pretty much done.
Out,
And
out
then
of out out of interest, those projects that are reached a stabilization point that you're happy with them, how long did that normally take from like starting the idea to getting to the point where now I have something that I'm happy with and it's mine?
Yeah, I don't know that I ever had the idea. I think that the ideas had me or something.
Yeah.
But look, the yellow snow pea was about 2 years or 3 years.
Mm.
The purple carrots sort of were a bit of an off and on project, probably 6 or 7 years to stabilize down. Doing a few sneaky things like putting an autumn crop in, selecting the roots out when they were small and putting them in the fridge and then pulling them out into the fridge to vernalize and pull them out so you can turn over a crop in 12 months instead of 24.
Mm.
But probably, yeah, 6 or 7 years on that. A bit longer on the parsnip because it's just proving intransigent I'm not intransigent, but bloody difficult to select out short fat roots consistently that aren't dreadfully misshapen and really weird. Yeah, and both of those crops were mass crossed by in flowers are also small,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
hand pollination's just, yeah, well, I wasn't interested in doing it. So let the insects and then just select out. So that does confound things a little bit. I did some perennializing leeks too, that is pretty much finished. So perennializing leeks are the ones where you put the leek in, you grow it, it dies down in the second spring, summer after flowering and throws a whole lot of little pearl bulbs at the bottom of where the leek was. Come autumn, it's like all the geophytes, it just sprouts again from the base with multiple little leeks. And those leeks are the size of a pencil. So they're much tougher in terms of getting them to pop out of the soil when you transplant them, rather than trying to struggle with some wispy bit of grass type thing that's come from the seed. But I thought, oh, look, let's put a bit of diversity into them. So I got hold of every leek I could find, grew them all out, picked the individuals that produced the best little bulblets down the bottom, and then grew them out again, reselected again, grew them out again, reselected again. And I'm happy with how that is. It hasn't quite got the diversity I want, but it's doing its job, so that's okay.
Did did
Um,
did your focus on particular crops that you were doing the most intensive, like grow out and selection, kind of shift year to year? Like I'm finding this like, oh, this year I'll focus on one or two crops to do all of the, variety trials or hand crossing, whatever you need to do. But after you get past that initial hump, your energy kind of gets freed up from that crop. It becomes a bit less intensive and you can consider taking something else on.
yeah, yeah, for sure. But I also think there's shiny new thing, shiny new thing. Um, when you get, well, for example, I was out last week and I was just walking along my beds and wild lettuce comes up everywhere along the edges where I haven't weeded properly and stuff. And there was a wild lettuce with purple spots on it. And I thought, this is crossed with that big purple spotted domestic lettuce that I
Mm.
grows everywhere here, just self seeds everywhere. Wow. Now there's a new project. I'm gonna have to collect seed off that and grow that out. And then you talk to people like you, and you sent me some nice seeds of stuff. Oh, brand new project. But I've got a whole lot more room now. So things like pumpkin, squash, corn that I've never ever been able to grow, one through lack of water and the other one through lack of space,
Mm.
has now broadened my possibilities and diluted my energies even further.
We'll save talking about the pumpkins when we get to the section about social
Okay.
networking, because that's the one that you
Yeah,
you
no
you rolled
worries.
out into the community, and I'm really keen to talk about that. So,
Uh,
do you do any hand pollinating?
I haven't since the tomatoes, I don't think, since the peas. So the
Mm.
peas were all hand crossed because I've never seen a cross in peas, like a natural one. And I did the tomatoes, but no, since then I really haven't done it.
Mm.
Look, I've done a few things, like I crossed my yellow snow pea to the purple snow pea, and a beautiful blood red snow pea came out of it. But the thing, like with all projects, the closer you look, the more exciting new projects arise out of the stuff that you've just produced. So the this lovely red, deep red snow pea it needs more work because it needs to be bigger and fatter and stuff. But this micro dwarf little 20 centimeter high red snow pea plant came out of it. Where did that come from? Like maybe I don't know,
Ha-
just too
ha-
vacant the day that I did the cross and the seeds come up and crossing them back to field peas as well, so that you get the semi-leafless trait coming through. And now that was on the back burner for like maybe 4 or 5 years. I just had the seed sitting there, and I finally said, "Come on, this is the year, put it in." So I put it in this year, and I've got all this fantastic different snow peas are coming out of it.
that's one thing I really emphasize to people breeding and saving their own seed is the flexibility that you have bad years where, life gets in the way or the weather's really terrible. But as long as you're confident that you've stored your seed correctly, you can just like say, well, I'll get back to it next time.
Oh, look, absolutely. Parsnip is the traditional, you got to plant it every year or the seed goes off. I put in some, I think it was 9 year or 10-year-old parsnip seed, and I didn't get, 100% germination or anything, but enough came up for me to go on with.
Mm.
And I think that was one, it was my own seed. I knew how old it was. Two, it hadn't been swept up off the commercial seed floor and put into a bag for domestic use. I stored it really well and dry it well and keep it in the fridge.
The
Um,
temperature fluctuations of things that go through the post, I think, can be really stressful for seeds.
yeah, yeah, and a packet of seeds hanging on the hardware shop wall in hot conditions for a couple of years, and yeah, stuff like parsnips just going to go off.
Have you had any crops that you started working on and just had to abandon, like they just didn't want to behave for you?
I'm sure I have. Oh, there's a few things that I just haven't bothered. Yeah, that haven't really done any different when I put in a whole lot of diversity. So, I've got late bolting and supreme and all these varieties described as, these will grow really well, and you put them all in next to each other and there's no difference.
Mm.
So I thought, you know, I'll just
Appa-
leave.
Apparently, there's some bulbing forms of coriander around because,
Oh,
like,
really?
carrot was originally like a herbal or leaf crop,
Yeah.
and it was only like eventually turned into the root crop that we know today. So maybe something similar is underway with coriander, that there's just a few strains. Parsley, there's like the Hamburg rooted parsley.
Yeah. Yeah. I just let parsley self seed here, and yeah, it's mixing up and throwing stuff, but yeah, it's no biggie. I just enjoy it. What other things have I had a bit of a go at?
Because I think anyone getting into this, it's worth knowing that it's not a magic wand. You can't just turn any crop into anything that you want. Sometimes your soil and climate will just be too much of a stretch for the thing that you really think you want to grow.
Yeah, look, I'm going to put this year. I could talk about it a bit later, but I thought I would give runner beans a go, Phascolis coccineus, and
Mm,
because there's what one or two varieties available in Australia, and the Australian Grains Gene Bank, which we might talk about later, had a few extra accessions that they gave me. So
mm.
I don't think it's going to do any good here at all. I think the frost is going to smash it if I plant it early, and I think the heat is going to stop it setting pods, and it's not going to enjoy Bendigo at all. But I don't know till I have a go, so why not?
Does it grow better down like on the Otway coast where it's kind of damp and maritime
I
and
think it does.
yeah.
Yeah, I think Tasmania and places like that is a good spot for it.
Mm.
Um, again, it's not my favorite eating bean either, so I don't know why I'm trying, but there's a
Sheer, sheer,
challenge. Let's have a go.
sheer bloody mindedness. Well, I did want to talk briefly where you source material for doing breeding from. That might be interesting because you've been doing this for quite a while and you've seen the landscape in Australia change, like where we can actually get our hands on material.
Yeah, look, I originally got a lot of stuff from wild garden seeds and adaptive seeds in the US. Well, not a whole lot, but if I'd known import restrictions were going to get even tougher, I would have brought in more. But yeah, I did manage to get some material in from them probably 15 years ago. And luckily, because I keep nearly everything in decent storage, even some of that old seed, when I go back to it, is still viable. So
Mm.
that's good. The other place is through people I've met on various gardening forums within Australia. And we do lots of swapping of seeds back and forth, particularly tomatoes. Tomatoes is a big one. And there's quite a lot of stuff I think did come in, over a decade ago, and people have got it and growing it out. And oh, I think that sounds like an interesting one. Send me some seed of that. I'll swap you with some stuff. But I'm not really into the tomato breeding that much. Otherwise, yeah, I suppose those heirlooms that people have around the place, and places like Diggers in Australia have some stuff that's good. Lots of the little small organic seed suppliers in Australia.
They're really
Uh,
proliferating online in the recent years, which is great to see.
yeah, how there are more. How many of those are folks who are just buying in big packets and sitting down in front of the telly at night and packaging it up, and we don't know where it comes from, and then they sell it really cheap.
Mm.
Think a lot of that goes on. Inspiration Seeds down in Tassie has got spectacular collection of beans, or did have. I haven't been in touch with them for a while, and I've corresponded with a few of the organic seed folks, and do a few swaps back and forth of some of that material. But the place that I've been really interested in recently is the Australian Grains Gene Bank at
Tell us more
Horsham.
about that. Tell us more about
Well,
that.
that's a government run organization, and they have like enormous collections of pulse and grain seeds in long-term storage. And if you're an interested researcher or a plant breeder, or probably a company, you can put in a request and they will send you the small amount of seed of the that particular accession.
Mm.
The database isn't hugely, it's searchable, but it doesn't have a whole lot of great data on it of the
Yeah,
stuff we want.
you kind of have to guess if you look for
Yeah.
sunflowers and there's 3,000 varieties, you're like, which ones do I actually want for my purpose? There's not a lot of information on specific varieties.
Yeah. Sometimes when I was doing the pea work, I looked at, because there's actually a pea that's resistant to salty water, which somebody in Australia did some research on. But I couldn't find what the accession was, and the accession numbers were of sometimes they're reproduced across international gene banks. So you could search the John Innes Python seed bank in the UK, and they have a really nice database that's really searchable by characteristic. And then I could look for the equivalent numbers on the gene bank in Horsham, and
Mm.
then put in a request for those accessions for that material. But often they have a source on them, and with the broadbean, fava bean work that I've been working on, I suppose, for 4 or 5 years, whether it's an elite line or from a breeding program or collected from a shop somewhere, but often they'll mark landrace on it. So I searched their 2,000 plus accessions, broadbeans, found everything with a landrace in it. I looked for anything, searched for this term drought or frost resistance or disease resistance, and came up with a list of things and asked for about 50 of those, I think,
Mm.
and then just planted them all together. And anything that survived in the I suppose the bed from hell, which is unweeded, unirrigated, and doesn't get any fertilizer. So very low input. It had a few wood chips put on top of it, and they just had to tough it out. And
Mm.
anything that got a seed out of that got harvested, along with all I think I probably had 15 collected ones from various people around the traps as well.
That's
And
one thing I'm starting to point out to people. If you have really difficult conditions, you can actually start to see it as a resource if you're doing breeding. Because if you're another person in like the perfect climate, perfect soil, no pests, everything's easy, you can't actually do selection for drought tolerance or frost
mm,
tolerance or any or bad soil or you kind of have your hands tied. I know there's some tomato breeders who keep a patch of ground completely infested with all of the tomato diseases so that they can throw everything in there and see what it does.
Well, what's the famous one from Frank Morton? The Hell's Half Acre, where he tests his lettuces, and it's just, you know, chock a block full of disease, and they just throw everything in there, and anything that comes through is a good one.
Mhm.
Interestingly, one of the parents for one of my purple snow peas was given to me by an unnamed researcher from an unnamed institute whose co-worker had slipped a couple of seeds into their pocket from a snow pea breeding program from their what we eventually called that line chamber of death. And that was the peas that came through from their disease infested hothouse where they used to check for disease resistance. So it's a tough little pea, that one. Yeah.
Mm. Hey, my favorite question to ask people that are doing breeding work, if you could like wave a magic wand and it take as many times, as much resources, like there's no limit here, and you could create a crop, what would you like kind of, will into existence?
Frost adapted mangoes.
Well, I mean, that family does go into pretty cold, dry locations in
Yeah.
places. So yeah, it's not impossible.
Yeah. It is possible. I was actually listening to a podcast the other day, and somebody's working on a mango flavored watermelon.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It's
yeah, I
well
can see
with
that.
tropical fruit flavors. Yeah, so that was pretty interesting. Oh, look, other things that I've sort of working on off and on is bok choy. I like eating bok choy, so I just put in a whole lot of bok choys and thought, let's see if we can pick one out of this. But that's early days.
Mm.
If I put it in now, probably everything will bolt. A brown storage onion.
Hmm.
So an onion that, and the only reason, I mean, Pukekohe longkeeper is a ripper onion. But I thought, oh, come on, let's put some bit of diversity back into that. And I think they're all basically very closely related, the ones that I can get hold of seed of from here. So what I've done this year is put in 15 different onions from all over the place, anything that I could just get easily in Australia from online sellers. And yeah, we'll grow those out and see how they go, see if we can get something from them. Uh,
Brilliant. Now you also do relatively low input production and growing. So do you want to tell us a bit more about like what aspects of the management you've managed to scale back the amount of work and inputs you have to do?
it's still too much. I don't go for full low input stuff, but I sort of got into sheet mulching with cardboard and
Hmm.
then wood chips on top and compost and various combinations of that. But my current regime, I suppose, is I have meter wide paths and I have meter wide beds
Mm.
just because I could. And I put down cardboard, and I'm in the middle of doing this now, putting down cardboard on the paths and then just topping with random Ramil wood chips from the local tree fella,
Mm.
which cost me money, but uh, I think I get 7 meters for $200. So, and that lasts me the best part of a year. So it's pretty low input. And I mean, that could be replaced by me wood chipping stuff around here and throwing stuff down. Some of those paths I let a bit of clover into them so that I've got a bit of a living pathway. But the clover really seems to harbor a lot of slugs and other bugs and stuff. So it's yeah, I'll let that one go, but I'm going to rip that one out sort of approach.
Yeah, yeah.
The the beds themselves are slightly raised. They're probably up about 6 inches, 15 centimeters, something like that. And that's just because when I got here, there was a bit of spare soil around and I didn't want it where it was. And the guy with the bucket said, "I'll just make up some beds for you." So he put it down for me. And what I've been doing recently is perhaps not biochar, so just charcoal.
Hmm.
And rather, I did have a charcoal kiln and did all that,
It's a lot
drum
of stuffing around getting it in, like cutting it to the right size to pack it in is a lot of work.
drums stacked up. And then because I'm next to a housing estate, it's like not rural.
Mm.
I've really got to worry about smoke and stuff like that, and people ringing up and the fire brigade arriving. And so a couple of those kilns like was so smoky that because they didn't draw properly. So what I've been doing now is just in a cheap steel fire pit, just chopping timber up and throwing it in and lighting it and just keeping an eye on it. And when it's beginning to get white ash on it, just damp it down with a hose and use that. And that adds nicely.
Mm.
But that goes onto a bed. I did get myself a broad fork a couple of years ago, but I'm backing off on the broad forking unless I need it to harvest a root crop out of that bed.
Mm.
And I'm trying to just um, go a bit Charles Dowding and top up with compost on top. And my compost isn't great compost. I'm not fantastic at compost making. But yeah, put a couple of 20-litre buckets onto a 10-metre row. And then I there's a few sheep farmers around here who do sheep manure.
Hmm.
I have been doing horse manure a little bit, but I'm really worried about, herbicide pollution.
Mm.
So I've sort of backed off on that a bit, and it's mostly just material from my garden in the compost. So I put down some compost. I put down like, just a scatter of sheep manure maybe once a year or twice a year if I'm feeling like it. And I have used a little bit of pelleted chook manure that I buy in, but not huge quantities, or blood and bone.
Mm.
Again, not huge quantities, like a cupful to 3 or 4 meters or something like that.
Do you
Each
find that if you've got locally adapted, vigorous crops, they seem to be a lot more efficient with the use of fertilizer, and that it's easy to over enrich beds as well too? That can cause problems if you use huge amounts of fertilizer.
Well, I've never used huge amounts of fertilizer, so I find it difficult to make a judgment on that. And I think I'm putting those additions onto my garden more for me than the plants. It makes it makes me feel like I'm doing something. So yeah, but it seems to work for me. Um, the 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 real tough beds out the front that are sort of a bit shaded by the huge river red gums and don't get any inputs at all. Like when I did the butternut pumpkins, the machadas, and I sort of fully embraced the land racing of those. Originally, I put in a great big bed. I got onto Pumpkin Paradise, the guy in Queensland who sells a huge diversity of pumpkins, and I got
Mm.
20 different machadas, I think, and I put them all in and grew them all out, and I ended up with probably half a ton of pumpkins, like huge things like this, and had this huge area covered in all these huge diverse pumpkins. Not one of them tasted any good. They'd, they'd, they'd been on dripper, and they'd been on, I think I'd given them a bit more feed, and they were just watery and insipid almost universally.
Mm.
And there was a couple that were okay, so they got put into a gene pool. And then I searched around for anything that was compact, small, um, smallish plant, and a butternut, and put in 5 different things. I think there was a Hungarian one, there was a North American, a South American, a local Australian one. Put them in, and like Joseph Lofthouse with his melons. The first
Mm.
year I got 3 or 4 tiny little things, a bit bigger than an orange, that had seed in them, and they'd survived on 2 waterings in the whole season.
Mm.
No fertilizer. They were just on a bit of vacant bed next to my driveway where I'd brought in a bit of sandy loam soil for some reason, and it was actually to make a bit of a swale. And yeah, so they got very, very tough love. Grew them out into the only bed I had the next year had a decent bit of compost and water in it, so they grew much better. And then I picked the best and tastiest ones out of that and then grew them out in sibling groups over probably about 15 meters of bed. Again, they didn't get any water from me or any fertilizer, and they were just superb butternuts, just the right size for us. Um, Very productive. 1 or 2 of them had blossom end rot, so they may or may not be in the gene pool, but we haven't had a real hot, dry year again to try them. Last year, they went into a bed and they were under about a metre of flood water for a while, so they survived that. But I think they're real tough. And I think this year I might actually grow some out in a nurtured bed
Hmm.
to see how well they do when they've actually given a little bit of love.
They might die
But
of shock. They'll,
well, I've
they'll,
just
they'll think you're preparing to backhand them when they least expect it.
look, I have distributed that some of that seed to some of my community growers, and
Do you want to get on to talking
oh
about
yeah,
that?
yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah,
this is
yeah.
a really great example of someone having a go, doing an experiment with a community breeding project, which I want to see more people thinking about this rather than just doing it all on their own. So
Well,
tell us about how that project happened and what just tell me the whole story.
okay. I got onto Going to Seed, the US sort of free website and organization and forum where people are sharing seeds. And we can't share seeds hardly at all with the North America. So you had to go with it by yourself. And they were going to do some community grow outs there. And I thought, look, I should give it a go here. I've got this, 20 liters of broad bean seed that's super diverse because I just did it myself. And to be able to select from a really diverse gene pool, you've got to grow out a lot of plants,
Hmm.
particularly if you've got a particular target in mind, um, apart from just survival. And, these range from tiny little dark brown pea-sized fava beans to, you know, things the size of an Australian 50-cent piece, um, and all sorts of colours. So anyway, at the call, like, who wants to grow broad beans? This is a community breeding project. I put it out on Facebook. I didn't do it, I didn't really broadcast it. I was pretty selective about the Facebook groups that I put the offer out to. And I went to a nearby town here called Castlemaine, which is got a higher concentration alternative and green um, residents, I suppose, and a pretty good permaculture groups and things like that. They're probably here in Bendigo, but it's much more diluted down. So finding those individuals can be a bit more difficult. Anyway, I went with them. I think I had about 25 or 30 participants. So I've got a little online seed store to try and sell some of my seeds. So, got plastic bags and scoops and printers and stuff. So I just bagged up a little, like 20 or 30 seeds for each person, and luckily got in touch with the delightful Eliza Jane Gilchrist, who runs the Castlemaine Seed Library. And she said, look, Greg, we'll put a plastic snap top container in the library. Anyone who participates and has contacted you will put their name in that, and they can just come along, take the seeds out of there and bring them back at the end of the year. So we did that. I also, got in the car and distributed some, and I posted some over to Ballarat and down to Melbourne and other people in Bendigo. And I think I got, oh, look, it was probably about 50 packets, I think, 50 different people. And I think I got back seed from 4 people.
Hmm.
One contact down in Muckleford, um, Andrew Brown, a couple of nice growers over in Ballarat who are probably in a quite wetter and cooler spot than me. So how good their um, environmental filters are, I'm not, for my use, I'm not absolutely sure, but they got some lovely diverse seeds. So that was great. And I thought to myself, that's not a great return.
Oh,
Gone.
sorry. No, you go. Sorry, you go.
I
I'm
said,
fascinated.
let's try pumpkin. So
Mm.
I've got these butternuts. They're a couple of years in. We'll distribute those around and see how they go. So I gave out again probably 30 or 40 packets of seed and didn't get any back the
Oh.
first year. But I stayed in correspondence with a couple of the people. A lot of it, and the second year around, so I did the same thing. I posted out and I left stuff in the seed library, and people took stuff and ticked their names off and all that sort of stuff. And the second year, I thought, oh, okay, let's change tack. If people want to play and they want to get these free seeds, they're going to have to come to my house and see my face,
Yeah.
and then we'll have that personal connection and hopefully engage a bit more that way. Again, I got very little seed back.
Mm.
Two or three people who were sort of keen to play, and that made me rethink a little bit. And first off, you're bitter. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, it can
People have
happen.
taken all my free seeds, and look, I've got nothing back. But then I thought, no, look, that's very ungenerous. It doesn't matter that people have got free seed. Greg, look at your two fridges full of seed. Are you short? No. Um,
There's
and that,
also the possibility that you've planted a cultural or a metaphorical seed in the community that's just going to take a few
oh,
years
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
come
yeah.
back and grow. Yeah.
Oh, look, it doesn't matter if those seeds are out being grown by somebody. That's fantastic
Mm.
because, a seed in the fridge is useless.
Hmm.
A seed in the ground is a good seed. And
Hmm.
that's where the seeds should be. They should be going in the ground every year. And it doesn't matter if I get them back or not. Like
Mm.
that's just stroking my ego, really. But I did get some stuff back, and there's one or two correspondents who are engaged and that it might be worthwhile continuing to work with. The well, it will be, and they are. So
Mm.
they've got seed this year and they're going to go on with it. I was just down at a little seed planting workshop down in Castlemaine a couple of weeks ago. And by chance, one of the people I dropped seed off to a couple of years before said, "Oh, I've got some of your seed in the car. Do you want it back?" So I did. I got it back, and that's now into the mix.
Yeah.
And I've also got a little bit of mix has come down from Ray South up in Armidale, New South Wales, and Grant Cutler, who's up in Queensland, has sent me a little bit of seed. And so that sort of goes into the mix just to add a little bit of more diversity into it. It probably does need more diversity overall, but I mean, really, oh, one thing I did do was I got hold of some what was supposed to be really elite, but a very special open pollinated butternut, supposed to be superb. I planted my stuff in the tough bed out the front and got, you know, good. We're still eating them, so got a fairly good crop off them. And this went into my research beds and got water and fertilizer and just struggled. I
Mm.
got one tiny little, and I thought, yeah, you're sold as being really superb, but you're not.
Well, it's probably superb somewhere, and
Probably.
it's a really interesting question that I don't have a handle on. Like when you locally adapt something, how local is local? Because like even on one farm or like between your beds, it might perform well in one
Yeah.
location and not in another, or with a slight tweak in the management, it could be like night and day. And yeah, community, I definitely think there's a lot of potential for community breeding, but different people's gardens are always going to pull the crop in a slightly different direction.
Yeah, absolutely. One of Andrew Brown down in Muckleford, he's not treating the stuff anywhere near as tough as I do. And he's getting decent crops off it and stuff, but they're still crossing up. So there's still diversity there and there's still some selection. So his stuff always goes into my mix.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's really good. But in terms of back to the community structure, I've thought about that. It's not it's not that people don't want to play or that they're ripping me off. It's okay, I got the seed in October. I'm harvesting in April, like it's 6 months later or something, and life gets in the way. People,
Mm.
like, for me, it's front of mind because this is, oh wow, I've got to collect seed and all that sort of stuff. For them, it's not going to be number one or number two on their, oh,
Mm.
I must do that this week agenda. And even with the best of intentions, stuff can just slip past you and you think, oh, bugger, I should have collected the seed for Greg from that.
Uh,
And
Pumpkins are probably a great example for getting this right because once they're ripe, if it's a variety with a decent storage property, you've got a long window for processing the seeds out. Whereas a lot of other crops like carrots, you might have a window of 2 or 3 days and then there's a rainstorm coming and the quality of the seed is going to drop dramatically after that.
yeah, look, I'm really lucky here with pretty long, dry autumns. So anything that's setting seed then can hold out in the field for a fair while,
Mm.
which is pretty good. But yeah, I'm rethinking again this year how we're going to go about distributing that seed because I haven't given up. I still think
Mm.
community breeding is really important. I've got a couple more new um, enthusiasts down in Melbourne, but they're really keen to play. And so we'll see how we go with that. And you suggested in one of your blog posts, I think, the pyramid selling model of community breeding.
Hmm.
I'm joking about that.
Oh, it works. I mean, pyramid schemes are scams for
Well,
a reason because they suck people in and they keep them coming back.
anyway, your suggestion, I think, was to get 4 or 5 people who have a bit more. I mean, people hear this idea of, oh, locally adapted plant. Yeah, yeah, we're going to get stuff and it'll be really easy to grow and low input and it's going to be fantastic. I mean, who wouldn't want the seed,
Mm,
unless,
mm,
and so of course they say, yeah, yeah, I'll be in that, but they actually don't have the background on um, how you might want to stress that population and how you might go about selecting from it and how
mm.
you might go about storing it and then how you
But
might go about combining it, which isn't rocket science, but
but
there's
it's
some
lots
stuff.
it's lots of little steps, and
Yeah,
if you get one of them completely wrong, then the whole thing kind of falls on its face.
yeah, yeah. And the your suggestion was, and I think it's fantastic, was to get 4 or 5 people who are uh, in tune with it or willing to undertake a little bit of self-education and mentor them much more tightly
Mm,
than throwing the seed out there and expecting it to come back in 6 months' time. So I'm trying to find folks who will be up for a monthly or 6 week get together and we
hmm.
can visit each other's properties. We can have a look at how it's going, share some more seed, have a feed,
Yeah,
and then get together to pull that seed at the end with the cunning plan that by the time they've spent a whole season growing in this model, they will have imbibed enough of the ideas of it that they can then go and recruit 4 or 5 other
yeah,
people
yeah.
to spread it again. And then I was thinking about that and I thought 2 layers is enough.
Mm,
20 people or 25 people growing out a population of seed in a community. Wow, that's
mm,
huge diversity. It's a huge area. It's a really large population size, and it's enough diversity that a single failure anywhere or multiple failures is not going to have the project fall over.
mm.
And if I die or disappear, then one of those other little seed cells can continue to proliferate.
It's like a branch that
Wider.
can break off and put its own
Yeah,
roots
yeah, yeah,
down. Yeah.
yeah. The other model that I thought of, perhaps I shouldn't mention this, terror cells. Isn't that how terrorist organizations work? So if the head gets chopped off,
They can keep functioning.
they can keep functioning.
I mean, the human psychology of forming like little teams and then competing with each other could be useful too. Like you could have a competition where there's like, the red team and the blue team, you're trying to grow the best pumpkin and then have like a blind taste test where you
That would
don't
be
know.
great.
You can all
Yeah.
get together and have like a pumpkin off at the end to see who actually had the best pumpkin.
Look, I've had a couple of thoughts about it. Um, at the moment, I put out a call a couple of weeks ago and I haven't had much of a response. And I'm thinking, okay, now I need to do a bit of outreach.
Mm,
So how do I do some outreach and some advertising or promotion so that I reach a few more people, 1 or 2 of whom might be enthused enough to take on this mentee mentor
mm,
model.
mm.
And just as an aside, and you see this elsewhere, like you hear it a lot in market gardener podcasts and stuff like that. Like growing the food isn't even a quarter of the job.
Mm,
The job is the selling, the promotion, the packaging, the distribution, the staying in contact with your CSA members so that all the engagement side is probably 2/3 or 3/4 of the work. And I
mm.
think that's the same possibly for community plant breeding. And I'm not great at it. I know that.
Well, I
Um,
mean, pe people who are really good at doing the breeding work tend to be kind of self-motivated loners. I think would be one way to put us in a bucket. My gut feeling with this model is partly geographically based. Like the more support somebody needs to get started, ideally the closer they should be to you geographically, because there are logistics of like getting in the car and driving however many minutes or hours and the closer someone is. I also suspect that there are better ways of using platforms like social media for engagement, but just broadcasting and like hoping that it reaches a million people has like a bystander effect. So, like if somebody gets attacked in a city, everyone just walks past and kind of looks the other way because they assume someone else is going
Yeah,
to help the
yeah,
person. That there's so many people who could be doing it, then the burden doesn't fall on them. So, yeah, finding ways of structuring the connections so that there's like a buddy system. Like when a new kid comes to a school, you assign somebody, some other kid to keep an eye on them and look after them, to just give them that first foot in the door. So yeah, that quality over quantity of connections, but still finding something to do with social media, like having a group just for that community, like that crop and that community, and just posting pictures of like how the crop is progressing. Like make it again that competition. It's like, oh, look how great mine is, or look how little water I gave this one and it's still doing well.
yeah, yeah. I think the this small cellular model does actually require a bit more of a buy-in for the participants,
Yeah, yeah.
because they're going to have to commit. And whether that's a barrier to participation or not, I'm not sure. But this is the plant breeding bit is just easy and it's fun, and I'm not ever going to stop doing that.
Mm,
Um, but possibly the hard work needs to be in this community-based and outreach area. I look at what Going to Seed are doing, and I think just because of the pure mass of people that they've got access to and the really strong networks of seed libraries and community gardens and stuff like that that they've got, and I think potentially, possibly not the same deeply religious attachment to heirloom vegetables that we seem to have here.
mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not sure, but they have gone with a much larger broadcast model and a really good mail out, follow up, email reminders of when to plant and when to water and when to look for fruit and how to, and they got that there's enough mass there, critical
Yeah.
mass, to actually push that process along so that I think they can make it work.
Mm.
I think here with our much smaller population, a much more dispersed population, finding enough engaged growers in the same geographic location, we might need to do something a bit different or a bit more special, which is
Yeah.
why this cellular model really, really attracts me, I think.
I'm going to be rolling it out up here next year with a few select crops so we can compare notes in the future.
Fantastic. Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I want people to be growing everything. I've got I've got so many projects on the go that I'd love people to be play with. So I'm working on maximas at the moment as well,
Hmm.
and cucumbers and hot mustard greens and um, the sweet corn. Like I grew out, I got hold of some really old astronomy domini sweet corn seed and nurtured that, and I've grown it out over 2 years so that I've now grown all the original seed, and I've got you know kilos kilos of AD seed, but I haven't eaten any, so I don't know what it's like.
I know that problem too when you start out with something really precious and you just want to bulk it up for a season or two.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
yeah, it can be a while before you actually get into to consuming it. We should probably wrap things up. We're pretty much at the hour,
yeah.
so we'll
Okay.
kind of look at some of the final questions. So this is a very broad question. What is your vision for the future of food in your community?
Mm. My vision, I suppose, is um, that we grow more stuff more locally and distribute it more locally. There's a pretty good food share group in Bendigo, and I participate in that where I can when I've got excess material. But yeah, that broader vision would be I've just recently finished reading David Holmgren's, what's it called?
Retro
Retro
suburbia?
Suburbia.
Yeah,
Retro
yeah.
Suburbia. And that's a really interesting model. Like, I'm a suburban boy. I grew up in the suburbs. I love the suburbs. Really high density living is not for me. And his model of a distributed food and resource community at the suburban scale just touched a really soft spot for me. And yeah, yeah. So that would be one way to go, I suppose. I'm also a bit pessimistic about where it's going to go, just with climate change coming. And, it is going to be frostier. It's going to be colder in winter and drier and, yeah, frostier and much hotter in summer. And our heat waves are going to be horrific. So,
All the more reason to breed locally adapted varieties
oh,
that aren't just perfect for now, that are dynamic and diverse that can keep changing into the future.
let's hope there's enough diversity there and the climate change isn't so extreme that I'm not going to be able to grow. I must say, when I first moved to Bendigo, to this new property, I mean, about 5 years ago, um, I had 42-degree days, about three of them in a row in October,
Mm.
which was, and I just poetically shat myself. And so I got online and I ordered 20% shade cloth, which is hail cloth, and sprung that up over our veggie garden. And that's just there permanently now. It's just
Mm,
taken the sting off the sun and a little bit of frost protection. But that's not a long-term solution to growing food.
mm. Who do you think I should interview next?
Oh,
And be ambitious because I'm very cheeky. I'll send an email to anyone. Or obscure people that like nobody's ever heard of that are like beavering away in their own little world that otherwise I'd never find them.
yeah. I did like a couple of your interviews. And so you've interviewed probably three or four of the people that I would have suggested in Australia. I'm not sure what Ray South is doing up in Armidale and whether,
I know Ray, so yeah, I will put him
yeah,
on the list. I've got lots of people that I've like crossed paths with like a year or two ago, and
yeah,
they're not at the front of my mind all the time.
yeah. I know Rowan down in Casterton in Victoria was doing some interesting stuff, but I think she's tended to move away from plant breeding now.
Yeah, I don't think she's done much
Yeah.
lately.
Oh, who's the guy who collected all of the bean seed that Inspiration Seeds in Tasmania have used? I
I
don't even know if he's still alive.
I've seen them mentioned, but
Yeah,
even Inspiration Seeds or the Pumpkin Paradise guy could be interesting to talk to. Someone who
absolutely.
really knows one corner of the cropping world inside out.
I would love to know if there's anybody breeding stuff in arid Australia,
Mm.
like really dry areas would be pretty interesting. I was going to say David Holmgren, but I think he's already been ticked off. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that one's been a boon. I'm very happy that I was
Oh,
lucky
look,
that way.
I'm so looking forward to hearing that one because to me, adapting plants for our growing conditions seems to be a huge blind spot for permaculture people.
Mm.
I don't know whether it is or not because I really haven't delved into permaculture sufficiently. What did David Holmgren say once? He didn't want to play permaculture anymore because he didn't want to belong to a cult. I I think he was being facetious. The and I am too. But
It definitely feels like it's almost a missing ingredient for permaculture that they've laid the groundwork with design, but you throw the kind of gasoline on the fire that is adaptation breeding. It just
yeah,
enhances things so much.
yeah. Like they the work they do is fantastic. Like I love the whole idea of permaculture and what they've done and where they've gone with it and the fact that it's now across the world. It's just delightful. But
They definitely can teach us a lot about community building
oh yeah,
and models of spreading information.
yeah. But the yeah, like I said, it just seems like there's a real they're great at adapting human communities, adapting landscapes, building swales and drainage and capturing the resources on a site. But you rarely ever see any mention of, hey, we know a whole lot about genetics. Let's fiddle with the genetics, and anyone can do it because we've been doing it for 15,000 years, and get stuff adapted to our locations rather than adapting the locations to fit, the weird varieties of vegetables that we want to import from long ago and far away.
Mm. Oh, it's one question I wanted to ask earlier, and it's a bit of a bonus question. Do you suspect that there is more to plant adaptation than just genetics? After seeing many different crops transform over the time you've been breeding them, do you suspect we don't have a technical grasp on the full story of what's going on biologically?
We don't know everything for sure, and so you're thinking in terms of traditional Mendelian genetics
Yeah.
and whether that's the whole picture. I'm sure it's not.
Mm.
Um,
It's definitely important. It's definitely part of it.
Look, it's so huge, and we know so much about plant genetics that it seems strange that so much has been ignored. But particularly from some of the things you've written
Mm.
about epigenetics and other stuff like that,
Mm.
which I don't really see. I'm not really looking hard for it either. But there's also a lot of genetics that, even in really good crops, traditional genetics that we don't know anything about. So,
Mm.
for example, snow peas. It's really well known that there's two genes for fiber in the pods. Just in correspondence with other people, we suspect that there's another gene that delays fiber production. So you can pick a pod before it's fully swollen and it doesn't have fiber in it, but then you leave it for a bit and fiber develops. We suspect there's a gene there or genes, but it doesn't seem to be documented even in a thing like peas were the first things that genetics were done on, and people have
Mm.
been doing it forever. So there's
Mm.
still a whole lot of stuff to be found out.
Mm.
Uh, One thing, though, I did find a research paper that looked at exposing young plants at the 2 or 3 leaf stage to drought stress and salty water, pre-adapts them to then go on and be able to grow really well. So
Mm.
obviously it's switching stuff on
Yeah,
that,
there's a window of plasticity after
yeah,
germination.
yeah, that's inherent in there. And I don't know what drives it. I'm not a geneticist. I actually don't have any formal biological training. Yeah, my training was pure maths and philosophy. So yeah, I'm sure there's stuff there for us to discover. Yeah.
So how can people learn more about what you're doing and maybe get in touch if they want to, I don't know, maybe buy some of your seeds even?
Well, yeah, they could have a look at usefulseeds.com, which is where I some of the seeds that I grow and some of the accessions and collections that I've managed to do seed increases on.
Hmm.
And that's just, useful seeds, one word, .com.
I'll drop the link. I'll
W-O.
drop the links in the show
Yeah,
notes. Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
My early stuff on peas and some of the early stuff on roots and carrots and stuff was in Templeton's Mendellania blog, but I haven't really kept that up for probably 7 or 8 years. So there's some early documentation there uh, that I probably should go and read so I can remember what I did. Apart from that, I'm on Facebook as Gregg Muller and as Useful Seeds, and on Insta as Useful Seeds.
And you have a few groups for community breeding I've seen on
Oh,
Facebook
look,
too.
there is. There's a Central Victorian Landrace Breeding Group on Facebook, and that's a good place to contact me if you're interested in that in Australia, I suppose. I'm happy to send seed to anyone, really. And the little online seed shop is probably might pay for itself in the long term. I'm not going to become the purple snow pea millionaire licking envelope. I don't reckon.
So, what is your final message for people thinking of getting into breeding, low input agriculture, community building, all of this kind of stuff?
Look, give it a go. It's not hard. Um, People have been doing this for 10,000 years. You don't need a biology degree. You don't need to be fantastic at growing vegetables or crops. You do need a little bit of enthusiasm. You need more than a year's time frame. So you need a few years where you're willing to engage with it. But the possibilities of developing really interesting crops for us to go on with is really high. And the other thing is, it's really good fun. Like if you've got a sense of discovery or how stuff works, it like stuff just comes up in my garden that I'm still like, where did that come from? Wow, what could you do with that? Like the spotted wild lettuce I found, or the snow pea I saw the other day that's only got half the red over the yellow. So it's this red spray burst over a yellow pod. It's just like it's spectacular. Or that tiny little 25 centimeter high snow pea that just popped out somehow, like stuff to, oh, the other thing, fava beans, broad beans. I grew this huge diverse crop and I noticed that the variety called red flowered or scarlet flowered or whatever it is has green seed coats. So I just went through this big bucket of seed, like kilos and kilos of seed. I've picked out 50 or 60 red, green seed coated ones, thinking, I wonder if this is linked to the flower color. Well, at least 50% of it is because I got all of these different flower colors came out of it. And favas are interesting because you can eat the flowers and they make a fantastic garnish. You can eat the growing tips. You can eat the baby pods and all, when they're the size of your little finger, and just cook them up, pods and peas and everything. You can eat the green seeds inside, and then you can harvest the dry seed and get a pulse out of it for
Yeah.
long-term storage. And it grows at a time when nothing else is growing down here in the gardens. Like
Mm.
it's just a magic crop. And so I've just picked out all these green sea coats. I've now got this multicolored flowered variety.
Mm.
And
Beautiful.
yeah,
And there's so many crops like that that can be adapted for home production where you get continuous output
mm,
from the garden. And most of the varieties that you buy from the nursery, they're commercial varieties that are bred to harvest all at once. So they can just run the pickers or the machines over them and be done. And that's the
absolutely.
last thing you want in a home garden where all the zucchinis ripen on the same day. And it's a nightmare.
Absolutely. And the way we're going, like, no one's going to develop those crops for us.
Mm.
Even if you just do traditional crop breeding in the old Mendelian genetics way, um, even that's useful work.
Mm.
But much easier is this adaptive plant breeding, And even if you don't want to do the whole mass grow out and pick the survivors and treat them tough business, get in on the second generation. Come and get some seed from me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got more seed than I could possibly grow.
Yeah.
And I want more people to grow it. I
Mm.
need more people out there growing it and testing this and coming up with questions and problems and ideas and racing off on their own projects, like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
more of it, more of it.
Well, Greg, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. This has been a fantastic episode, and maybe I'll check back in a couple of years and see how things have progressed.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, cheers. And thanks so much for the opportunity, Shane. I really appreciate it.
The Zero Input Agriculture podcast is a solo passion project built with my ample time and meagre resources. If you would like to support the show, then sign up for a paid subscription to my Zero Input Agriculture blog at Substack. As a reward, you can read all my past posts and listen to the audiobook of Taming the Apocalypse. If you prefer reading about the past and future of biological technology, you can read the ebook of Taming the Apocalypse through Amazon. And finally, please rate and review the show on whatever podcast app you use, since it helps other people find me. Or recommend the show directly to anyone who could use some inspiration to become a plant breeder themselves.